Laugh at the cringe, learn from the crumble. This is Cringe and Crumble. Welcome to the podcast where honesty meets humor and the messy parts of life finally get their spotlight. I'm your host, Tranisha, and here we dive into dating, friendships, healing, and all the awkward in-betweens. Because here's the truth. Growth isn't always pretty, but it's always real. So let's get into it. Welcome back to Cringe and Crumble. I'm your host, Tranisha, and today we're going to be talking about consistency in dating. Because if you're confused, that's the information. Confusion is not a personality trait, and it's not just how dating is. It's usually a sign that the behavior in front of you isn't stable enough to build trust. So in this episode, we're going to get really clear on a few things. First, we're going to be defining what consistency actually is, and not the fancy version and not the good morning beautiful text version, but the real life version that shows up in patterns like communication, follow through efforts, and how someone handles you when life gets busy. Then we're talking about how to recognize it early so you're not months deep trying to interpret someone else's intentions when their behavior has already been answering you. We're also going to be naming what inconsistency looks like in real time. You know, that hot and cold energy, breadcrumbing, disappearing and resurfacing whenever they feel like it, future talk with no follow-through plans, emotional availability only when it benefits them, and why those patterns can keep you in a cycle of overthinking and self-doubt. Because inconsistent behavior doesn't just confuse the relationship, it confuses you. It makes you question your standards, your intuition, and sometimes even your worth. And finally, we're going to be getting practical. How to stop getting stuck in these cycles and what to pay attention to instead of the potential, and how to move with clarity without becoming hard and bitter, and even without abandoning yourself just to keep someone close. And I'm going to actually give you a way to evaluate behavior so that you can stop decoding and start choosing what actually supports your peace. So first things first, let's define what consistency is. Consistency in dating is basically alignment over time. Maintaining a regular pattern of behavior. It's when someone's words and their efforts and behaviors stay steady enough that you don't have to guess where you stand. Most people think consistency just means text me every day, but that's not it, because consistency isn't constant access. It's predictability, it's follow through, and it's being able to relax because the connection doesn't keep shifting on you. And when people say they want consistency, they usually mean regular communication that makes sense, no random disappearances, plans that actually happen, and a steady level of interest that doesn't suddenly drop off for no reason. In simple terms, you don't feel like you're auditioning for someone else's attention. And therapists usually talk about consistency as a foundation for emotional safety, that kind of safety that creates secure attachment, and they tend to look at a few building blocks. First is predictability. You generally know what to expect from this person. It's not that they're boring, but it's just that they're stable. Second is responsiveness. If they're busy, they communicate. If something changes, they update you instead of leaving you hanging. And third and finally is alignment. Their action matches their words. I'll call means they call, or they explain why they can't. Let's plan turns into a date and not just a vibe. And here's the one people forget, which is repair. Consistent people don't pretend nothing happened. If they miss a beat, they address it. They apologize, they clarify it with you, and they don't punish you with silence. So I want you to think about this. Consistency isn't perfection, it's pattern. It's steady. It's the ability to trust what you're experiencing. Consistency is what makes love feel safe and not intense. So now let's talk about the opposite, because inconsistency has a very specific signature. Inconsistency in dating is when someone's attention and effort show up sporadically. It's kind of like that on and off that I talked about earlier. But there's no steady pattern you can trust. Most people describe it as a hot and cold behavior. One day they're texting you like they're all in, they're love bombing you basically. And then the next day they're distant or they disappear and pop back up like nothing ever happened. It looks like vague plans that never become real plans. They're broken follow through, mixed signals, or communication that feels random and on their terms. And the biggest sign is you're constantly guessing where you stand and you're reading between the lines and you're just trying to figure them out. So therapists often talk about inconsistency as more than a dating annoyance. It's a form of emotional unsafety because it keeps your nervous system activated. Your brain can't relax when the pattern isn't stable, so you start scanning for the next shift. Are we good? Are we not? Did I do something wrong? And the one reason it's so sticky is intermittent reinforcement. When you get attention sometimes, but not constantly, it can make you more attached because you're chasing that version of them that felt really good, right? And so you start negotiating for clarity instead of receiving it. Now, to be fair, everyone does get busy, but people miss a text and life happens. But inconsistency isn't a moment. It's a pattern, and a consistent person will communicate and repair. An inconsistent person will leave you confused and call it going with the flow. And if you're confused, once again, that's the information. So the question would be as to why do people act inconsistent? Well, let's talk about it. Number one, they like attention more than commitment. Some people love the feeling of being wanted, but they don't like the responsibility that comes with showing up. So they want connection on demand and not consistency on purpose. So when I think about this, sometimes I think about a narcissist in a sense because all they want is all this unnecessary attention. And it kind of feels a little bit of selfishness, but you may interpret that very differently. Number two, they avoid intimacy. They like the idea of closeness until closeness requires effort and clarity or even emotional presence. So they lean in, but then they pull back because consistency would mean being seen and that feels too real. So when I think about this, I always think about sometimes you meet people where they have had like bad relationships in the past. They feel like they've been burned. And so they're a little jaded and they're taking whatever happened to them in that past relationship and they're bringing it into this new relationship. So in a sense, to me, it's like they're bringing in their trauma. But however, there's another version where they just avoid intimacy because they just are not into you. So number three, they're keeping their options open. Not always malicious, but it's noticeable. When someone's attention is split, your connection gets leftovers. And so you'll fill in the gaps in the delayed responses. They give you those vague plans and that last minute energy. And when I think about this, I think about those people who are just constantly just waiting for the right person to come along. But sometimes if you think about it, they're keeping their options open just because maybe they're just insecure with themselves and thinking that this person isn't into them as much as another person is. I don't know. I'm just giving them the benefit of the doubt. So number four, they lack the skill to communicate directly. So some people aren't trying to play games. They just don't know how to be honest about what they want. Instead of saying, I'm not ready, they stay vague. And instead of ending it, they give you those breadcrumbs. So when I think about this lack of communication, I think honestly, there are some people out there who have never, ever had adult conversations. So they don't really know how to communicate their feelings or their emotions. And so what they do is they do less. And to them, it may be normal, but in a relationship, it's not normal because you need that two-way communication. But on a malicious note, there could be the people where the guy just doesn't want to be the bad guy, so they don't want to look bad. And what they do is they push you away and don't communicate to the point where you're at your breaking point and you decide, let's end this because you're not communicating and it's okay with them. I know it's a lot to take in, but whatever the reason is, your job is not to interpret it. Your job is to respond to it. All right. So let's talk about why inconsistency feels familiar, though. It's almost like it's a trap. So inconsistency can feel familiar and familiar can feel like chemistry, and that's the trap. If you ever grew up earning love, you'll try to earn clarity. And if you're used to emotional unpredictability, stable efforts can feel boring. And not because it's wrong, but because your nervous system isn't used to peace. And when things are unclear, your brain turns it into a puzzle. So confusion creates obsession because you keep trying to solve what you should be stepping away from. So let's make this practical. Let's get into pattern recognition because this is where most of us get played. not by the person, but by our own optimism. We keep dating off potential and we keep dating off of vibes. And vibes are cute, but they don't build relationships, but patterns do. So one sweet date doesn't erase 3 days of disappearing, and one I miss you text doesn't fix a month of inconsistency. And pattern recognition is how you stop letting moments talk louder than their behavior. So ask yourself, am I falling for their moment or am I trusting their patterns? Because inconsistent people are often amazing in moments. That's the trap. The moments are intense and the pattern is unreliable. All right. So here's a consistency scorecard. 7 days, 7 questions. Each one is a simple yes or no. Did they initiate with intention? That's number 1. Number 2, did they follow through on what they said? Number 3, did they make real plans in the form of a date, time, and place? Number 4, did they confirm and show up? Number 5, when they were busy, did they communicate instead of vanishing? Number 6, did they move things forward, not just talk in circles? And number 7, if something went wrong, did they repair, own it, clarify it, and make it right? Now, I'm going to give you one non-negotiable. If they disappear for days with no communications and pop back up like nothing happened, that's an automatic no for the week. Not because you're being dramatic, but because we're adults and adults communicate. Now, on the flip side, if something genuinely happens and they communicate and repair it, that's a green flag because consistency isn't perfection, it's accountability. Now that we have this scorecard, we actually need to score it. So if they hit between a 6 to a 7, that means they're consistent, they're intentional, they have full plate energy, and we love it. I like to call them the top chef, right? Now, if they're between 4 and 5, we're going to proceed very slowly because they're on the chopping block at this point. There's no future fantasies. No, I just need to be more patient. If they're between 0 and 3, they're completely chopped because if you're confused, that's the information. You stop trying, you stop explaining, you stop hoping, you move on. Now, think about the last person who confused you. Was the issue really them, or was it that their pattern didn't match their words? If you scored them and the numbers aren't numbering, here's the main pattern to watch out for in the wild. It's the hot and cold behavior because this is what keeps people confused and attached. Hot and cold is when someone shows up intensely and then they disappear. They pull you close, then create distance, and every time they come back hot, it makes you forget how cold it felt because the relief feels like connection. So hot looks like this. Hot is that deep texting, it's that flirting, it's that big energy, it's all that love bombing that people go through. You have the talks about the future, they compliment you. There's that sudden emotional intimacy going on and on and on about how special you are and how they've never felt this way before. But then the cold looks like they slowly stop replying. There's vague plans and they start doing that disappearing act. They only pop up whenever it's convenient to them. And then they act like you're asking for too much the minute you ask for clarity. And the reason it's so addictive is because it creates a cycle, this whole hot and cold behavior. You start chasing the version of them that felt good, You start trying to earn that hot back, and suddenly you're renegotiating for the basic consistency like it's luxury. It's just the bare minimum. So if it's hot and cold, it's not chemistry, it's inconsistency. And one of the most common cold behaviors you have to think about inside of this cycle is breadcrumbing. Now, I mentioned breadcrumbing earlier, and you're probably like, what is that? Breadcrumbing is when someone gives you just enough attention to keep you interested without any real intention of building a relationship. It's like the emotional equivalent of snacks, right? You're never fed, you're just kept around. And here's what that looks like. You receive that text that says, I miss you, but then they never make a date. Or they say, we should hang out soon, and then nothing. No follow-up, no plans, no effort, no nothing. Then they do these little emotional check-ins when they're lonely, just enough to keep the door open. Like, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling today? Those little things. And then they'll like your stories, watch everything you post, even flirt in reactions, but they won't actually show up in real life. And the reason this messes with people is because it feels like interest. It feels like connection, but it's not. It's just maintenance. breadcrumbing isn't romance, it's just retention because they're not building a relationship. They're keeping you as an option. Now, let's do a quick TikTok translation of this cold cycling and breadcrumbing because the internet always names the patterns before we're ready to even admit we're in it. And the first one is pocketing, which I've learned. Pocketing is when someone keeps you close enough to have access to you, but hidden enough that you're not part of their real life. You get the texts, you get the late night calls, you get the I miss you, good morning, but you're not meeting friends. You're not going out in the daylight and you're not moving forward. And I just want you to hear me. And I just want you to hear me. If you only exist in private, that's not consistency, that's containment. And the second one is cookie jarring, which is basically when you're one of the multiple options. So you're getting a portion, not the full plate. They'll check in, they'll keep you warm, but the effort is inconsistent because it's spread out over multiple people. And you feel it because you're always getting the leftover version of them. If you're in rotation, you're not being pursued, you're being stored. And whether you call it pocketing, cookie jarring, or hot and cold, the outcome is the same. You're left uncertain. If you're confused, that's the information. So let me leave you guys with this as I close out, because I think a lot of us have all been in this cycle before, hot and cold action. We don't know where we stand in a relationship, and it's very frustrating. But I really hope that you all take something away from this episode and understand that consistency is the real romance because it's the thing that lets you breathe. It's not grand gestures. It's not chemistry that keeps you guessing. It's steady effort you can trust. So if the pattern is hot and cold, if the plan is always soon, and if the intimacy only shows up when they're lonely, call it what it is. Don't negotiate with confusion. You don't have to hate them. You just have to stop giving access to someone who won't give you clarity. Because if you're confused, that's the information. And let that be your standard. If it costs you your peace, it's too expensive. So that's it, guys. Just laugh at the cringe and learn from the crumble. Until next time. Laugh at the cringe, learn from the crumble. This is Cringe and Crumble. Until next time.